Today's deep dive focuses on the architectural mechanics, security vulnerabilities, and mandatory migration paths, from the OAuth 2.0 framework to the OAuth 2.1 draft specification.
Understanding these mechanical changes is critical knowledge for software engineers. We're looking at how to avoid deploying inherently insecure authorization flows in modern computing environments.
Because if you think about it, handing over the master keys to your entire digital infrastructure simply because a legacy web app was built around outdated browser limitations, that is a critical vulnerability millions of systems expose themselves to currently.
Which is why we are utilizing the official draft specifications and formal requests for comments documents to map out this migration. The goal here is to ensure your systems avoid catastrophic breaches by implementing modern cryptographic proofs.
Part 1. The OAuth Decision Framework. Before analyzing the new requirements, we really must establish the foundational architecture of delegated access defined under RFC 6749.
Often just known as OAuth 2.0. The core function of this framework allows third-party applications to obtain limited access to an HTTP service, either on behalf of a resource owner or by acting autonomously.
And central to this architecture is the strict division between two distinct communication channels. You have the front channel and you have the back channel.
The front channel represents the communication path executed via the user agent, which in most modern computing environments is the web browser. The defining characteristic here is that it relies on an execution environment the client application fundamentally does not control.
Because it operates on the user's local machine, it is a highly hostile environment for sensitive data. Information passing through the front channel is susceptible to malicious interception or even permanent exposure in local browser history files.
Not to mention unauthorized leakage through HTTP referer headers sent to external tracking domains. The back channel, conversely, provides a direct, highly secure server-to-server communication path,
Operating exclusively between the client application's backend infrastructure and the authorization server. It is secured continuously by Transport Layer Security (TLS) and bypasses the user agent entirely.
Understanding this architectural separation is essential for categorizing application types into confidential clients and public clients. Confidential clients are secure back-end servers capable of safely storing a cryptographic client secret without exposing it to the end user.
Whereas public clients include native mobile applications or single-page applications where the source code executes directly on the user's device. In those environments, embedding a static secret is equivalent to publishing it publicly. Secure storage is literally impossible.
The mental model for authorization architecture is shifting fundamentally here. The original OAuth 2.0 framework offered a choose-your-architecture approach, providing multiple execution flows to accommodate diverse computing constraints.
But the draft OAuth 2.1 specification discards this flexibility entirely in favor of mandatory security defaults. It consolidates a decade of industry best practices into strict cryptographic requirements. Which leads to an obvious question: if OAuth 2.0 is the industry standard, what specific technical changes in modern web environments force the creation of OAuth 2.1?
The evolution of browser capabilities and the severe escalation of threat vectors rendered the original flexibility dangerous. Consider the development landscape back in 2012. Browsers lacked mature support for cross-origin resource sharing, or CORS.
That technical limitation prevented client-side JavaScript from executing secure back-channel HTTP POST requests to a separate authorization domain. The browsers would actively block those requests to prevent cross-site data theft.
So OAuth 2.0 introduced specific workarounds to bypass these limitations. It intentionally routed sensitive data through the front channel because developers had no alternative for client-side applications.
Today, robust CORS support is universal across all modern web browsers. Developers can securely configure pre-flight requests and establish trusted cross-origin communication.
Which removes the architectural necessity for those insecure legacy workarounds entirely. Simultaneously, the massive proliferation of third-party JavaScript tracking scripts and complex browser extensions drastically increase the probability of front-channel data exfiltration.
Tools that were once acceptable compromises are now critical attack vectors. That brings us to part 2. Deprecating legacy flows. Let's examine the primary casualty of this architectural shift, the implicit grant.
The implicit grant flow was engineered specifically for client-side applications running within a web browser. It initiates by utilizing the parameter response type token. Following successful user authentication and consent, the authorization server returns the access token directly in the browser redirect URI fragment,
Denoted by the hash symbol. As shown in the diagram on screen, the token bypasses the back channel entirely. The implicit flow skips the secure authorization code exchange step and deposits the highly sensitive access token directly into the insecure front channel for the browser to process.
And the failure modes for this pattern are severe and easily exploitable. URI fragments do not leave the browser during standard HTTP requests to a server, but they do remain permanently recorded in the browser's local navigation history.
Imagine an enterprise environment where employees utilize shared workstations. The access token sits plainly in the history logs for the next user to extract.
Furthermore, when the callback page redirects the user again or executes routine third-party analytics scripts, that access token routinely leaks to external servers via the HTTP referer header.
A critical secondary vulnerability is the complete absence of client authentication in this flow. Without a secure back-channel token exchange requiring a cryptographic secret or verifier, any entity intercepting the redirect URI can immediately extract and utilize the access token.
This architecture leaves applications highly susceptible to cross-site scripting or XSS attacks. If an attacker injects a malicious script into the application, that script executes with the same permissions as the application itself.
It can seamlessly scrape the token directly from the URL fragment, from local storage or from session storage, and transmit it to an external server. Due to these heavily exploited vectors, the draft OAuth 2.1 specification removes the implicit grant entirely.
Another deprecated pattern requiring immediate removal from your systems is the Resource Owner Password Credentials Flow, or ROPC. This legacy anti-pattern utilizes the parameter grant type password.
The application presents a custom login screen, collects the user's raw username and password parameters, and submits them directly via an HTTP POST request to the authorization server to acquire an access token.
The ROPC flow completely defeats the core principle of delegated access. The central objective of the OAuth protocol is to enable authorization without ever requiring the resource owner to reveal their master credentials to a third-party application.
Implementing ROPC conditions users to trust third-party interfaces with their long-term passwords. This exponentially expands the phishing risk surface across the internet.
The structural limitations of ROPC also break modern security infrastructure fundamentally. Because the flow expects a static, one-time submission of a username and password, it cannot natively accommodate multi-factor authentication.
The API endpoint handling the POST request cannot process dynamic challenge prompts, hardware security key validations, SMS codes, or external single sign-on federation.
Furthermore, ROPC provides no consent screen. This prevents users from auditing the specific data scopes being granted to the application. For all these reasons, OAuth 2.1 removes ROPC entirely.
Which brings us to part 3, the gold standard authorization code and PKCE. With the legacy flows deprecated, we must implement the modern secure alternative.
The authorization code grant is the definitive standard for authenticating human users. It operates via a bifurcated process specifically designed to mitigate front channel vulnerabilities. Step 1 occurs entirely in the front channel.
The application initiates an HTTP GET request to the authorization endpoint utilizing the parameter response type code. After authenticating the user and obtaining consent, the server issues an HTTP 302 redirect, returning a short-lived authorization code.
This code is merely an indicator of successful authentication. It is not the token itself, and it provides no access to data. Step 2 executes strictly in the back channel.
The backend application server constructs a secure POST request to the token endpoint. This payload includes the parameter grant type authorization code, the short-lived authorization code received from Step 1, and the highly confidential client secret.
The authorization server validates the code and authenticates the client using the static secret. Only after this verification does the server issue the JSON payload containing the actual access token.
But the standard authorization code grant relies entirely on the client's secret to authenticate the application during Step 2. This presents a critical vulnerability for public clients like native mobile apps and single-page applications.
As we established, these clients cannot securely store a static secret. RFC 7636 introduced the proof key for code exchange extension, or PKCE, to resolve this architectural flaw.
PKCE dynamically generates a unique cryptographic secret for every single authorization request, eliminating the need for a static secret.
The mechanics of PKCE establish an unbreakable cryptographic bind between the initial front-channel authorization request and the subsequent back-channel token exchange. Before initiating the flow, the client generates a high-entropy random string called the code verifier.
It then creates a code challenge derived by applying a SHA-256 cryptographic hash function to that code verifier. The initial front-channel request includes this code challenge and specifies the hashing method being used.
The sequence diagram illustrates the authorization server computing the SHA-256 hash to eliminate authorization code injection attacks. During the backchannel token request, the client submits the original plaintext code verifier.
The authorization server independently applies the SHA-256 hash to this plaintext verifier and compares the result against a previously stored code challenge.
An intercepting attacker who manages to steal the authorization code in the front channel lacks the dynamically generated plaintext verifier. Because SHA-256 is a mathematically irreversible one-way function, the attacker cannot reverse engineer the verifier from the challenge.
The token exchange fails, rendering the stolen code useless. Think of PKCE as a dynamic claim check ticket, where the client must prove they hold the cryptographic stub that matches the initial request.
OAuth 2.1 unifies protocol security by making PKCE mandatory for all client types. It replaces static client secrets entirely in public environments and augments them in confidential environments.
Part 4. Machine-to-machine and real-world implementation. We have covered user-centric flows, but we must address automated systems. The client credentials grant governs scenarios lacking human interaction.
This flow is built explicitly for back-end microservices, automated cron jobs, and command-line interfaces communicating with external APIs. In this model, the client application acts autonomously as the resource owner.
This flow bypasses the front channel entirely. There is no browser redirection to a login page and no user consent screen. The process consists of a single, highly secure back-channel interaction.
The client application executes a direct HTTP POST request to the token endpoint utilizing grant-type client credentials, alongside its specific cliented and client secret.
The resulting access token is strictly bound to the machine identity and predefined permissions of the application itself, rather than an individual human user.
Because this architecture relies heavily on the secure storage of a static secret, it is strictly limited to confidential clients operating on trusted back-end infrastructure.
Examining a real-world scenario clarifies how these parameters execute in production. Consider tracing the exact sequence for a standard login with Google implementation using the authorization code flow.
The process begins with an HTTP GE2 request directed to accounts.google.com. The query parameters must include response type code to trigger the correct grant type.
The request includes a specific cliented registered previously in the Google Cloud Console. The requested scope parameter defines the exact permissions required, such as opened profile email.
Crucially, the request must include a cryptographically random string for the state parameter. Following successful user consent, Google's authorization server issues a callback redirect to the application's pre-registered URI.
The user's browser receives an HTTP 302 found response containing the authorization code and the exact echoed state parameter provided in the initial request.
The application's backend receives this request and must immediately execute a direct POST to oauth2.googlelepus.com token, utilizing the authorization code and its client credentials to finalize the exchange.
A common critical pitfall during implementation is failing to validate that return state parameter against the original request. The state parameter is designed specifically to maintain session integrity between the initial request and the callback.
Ignoring this validation step opens the application directly to cross-site request forgery or CSRF attacks. Walk through the attack vector carefully.
An attacker initiates an authorization flow on their own machine. They intercept the callback URL, which contains a valid authorization code tied to their own attacker account.
The attacker then tricks a victim into clicking that intercepted callback URL. If the application's backend fails to check the state parameter to verify that the victim session actually initiated the request, the application blindly exchanges the code.
The victim is forcefully logged into the attacker's account within the application. Any sensitive data the victim subsequently enters, such as credit card details or personal information, is saved directly to the attacker's profile.
Strict cryptographic validation of the state parameter guarantees the callback corresponds directly to the localized session that initiated the request, preventing this forged injection.
How should developers handle automated legacy backend scripts that currently emulate a user login by submitting stored user passwords?
The explicit architectural solution is to migrate those scripts immediately to the client credentials grant. Emulating human user logins programmatically violates the core principles of delegated authorization.
It creates fragile, interconnected systems that break instantly upon the introduction of mandatory multi-factor authentication policies across an organization.
engineering teams must register the backend script as a distinct machine identity within their identity provider. They must configure application-specific scopes, strictly limiting what that machine identity can access, and utilize grant-type client credentials to retrieve autonomous access tokens natively.
Implementing the transition to OAuth 2.1 principles requires immediate architectural adjustments to your deployed systems. You need to execute 3 concrete action items this week to secure your infrastructure against these discussed vulnerabilities.
First, audit all single-page applications and mobile applications in your codebase for any instances of response-type token and migrate them to the Authorization code grant utilizing the PKCE extension.
Second, identify and systematically replace any remaining resource owner KaaS credentials flows. You must implement standard delegated consent screens.
Third, verify that all your backend callback endpoints strictly validate the state parameter to prevent cross-site request forgery vulnerabilities.
For rigorous technical implementation details, you must directly consult RFC 6749 for core framework mechanics, RFC 7636 for precise PKCE cryptographic generation requirements, and the official draft OAuth 2.1 specification documentation.
Those documents provide the exact parameter formatting required for compliance.
Let us know in the comments what specific implementation challenges you are facing, particularly regarding complex chorus configurations or legacy system integrations during your migration efforts. As authorization shifts from flexible choices to strict cryptographic proofs, consider what other legacy workarounds in your current stack are becoming tomorrow's critical vulnerabilities.